The sun dipped behind the ragged hills surrounding Pine Hollow, bleeding rusty light across the sky like someone had scratched open the horizon, and the dusty old town, once peaceful, once proud, sat trembling beneath it as though it already knew something was coming, something loud, something unstoppable. The air was too still, the silence too sharp, the kind that cut through a man's nerves and warned him that the night would not be quiet, would not be safe, would not be normal. And that's when the first low thunder rolled across the asphalt highway. The sound of engines, not clouds, the harsh, powerful roar of tuned steel ripping through the distance as the Iron Vipers Motorcycle Club approached Pine Hollow like a storm on two wheels. 15 riders in formation, leather vests patched with serpents and skulls, chrome pipes gleaming, headlamps burning through dust as if daring the darkness to challenge them. And at the front of this metal beast rode Jack's rider. A man built from equal parts grit and gravity, a man whose silence held more weight than most men's threats, a man with eyes that scanned the road with a hunter's patience, seeing everything, missing nothing, calculating each turn like he had memorized the world years ago. He wasn't riding for a thrill tonight, nor for a fight, though he never ran from either. He was riding because Pine Hollow had called for help in the only way a town that's already been broken knows how. Quietly, desperately, through someone who should have never been forced to ask for help in the first place. And that someone was Lily Hart, a schoolteacher with soft hands, tired eyes, and a voice that shook when she spoke, not from weakness but from carrying the kind of fear that wears down even the strongest hearts. And she had sent a message to the Iron Vipers days ago, asking for Jax by name, reminding him of her father, Elias Hart, the retired mechanic who once helped the Vipers out of a tight spot years back when the club was younger, wilder, hunted by men who wanted them gone. And Elias, despite being a simple man with grease under his nails and kindness in his bones, had stood beside them and said, everyone deserves a fair shot, saving their hides and never asking for anything in return. But now he needed something, and Lily had explained everything in a quiet, pained voice over a crackling phone call. How Mayor Clifton Reed, a man with a soft handshake and a hard soul, had forced Elias off his land with forged documents and fake claims of unpaid property taxes. How Sheriff Douglas Pike, the mayor's old friend and attack dog, sent deputies to intimidate anyone who questioned the eviction. How they stood on Elias's porch with smug faces while Lily and her father were shoved out with nothing but a cardboard box of his belongings. How Pike laughed as he drove away. And how the town, full of good people, said nothing because fear had turned them silent. And as Lily spoke, Jax felt something cold settle in his chest, a familiar chill he only felt before delivering justice the rough way, the honest way, the way the law pretended to provide but rarely did. So when he finished hearing her story, he didn't make a speech, didn't promise anything dramatic, didn't swear vengeance like some storybook hero. He simply said, "We're coming," and hung up, because with the Vipers, that sentence meant more than any threat. And now, as their engines growled at the edge of Pine Hollow, the whole town seemed to hold its breath, curtains shifting as curious, frightened faces peeked out, watching the riders slow their formation before turning down Main Street, where old signs flickered, businesses clung to life, and people hurried indoors like the wind had turned dangerous. When the Vipers parked outside Betty's Diner, the only place still open at this hour, the ground itself seemed relieved when the engines finally quieted, replaced by boots hitting pavement, leather creaking, and the metallic clink of chains and buckles as the bikers dismounted, stretching sore muscles from the long ride, while Jax scanned the street with a predator's calm, noting how fast the shadows moved, how quickly the townsfolk hid, how broken the place felt. And he hated it, not the fear itself but the cause of it, because fear wasn't natural here. It didn't belong in a small town where kids used to play on porches and old folks used to gossip on benches. But now the benches were empty, the porches dark, and the silence heavy with dread. Jax walked into Betty's Diner first, pushing the door open with a slow, deliberate ease, letting the bell overhead chime weakly, announcing their presence as if nervous to do so. And the warm scent of frying onions and stale coffee hit him, along with a heavy tension that hung like a storm cloud over the dozen customers inside who froze at the sight of the bikers. Forks paused mid-air, conversation dying instantly, but Betty herself, a stout woman with fire in her eyes even at 60, stepped forward with a small smile, nodding at Jax like she'd been expecting him. Because Pine Hollow talked, Pine Hollow knew things, Pine Hollow whispered truths even when men like Mayor Reed tried to bury them. And she gestured toward a booth in the corner where Lily Hart sat waiting, her fingers wrapped tightly around a chipped coffee mug, knuckles white with strain, shoulders trembling as she exhaled in visible relief the moment she saw him, standing quickly though her legs wobbled slightly, and Jax approached her with the calm of a man who already understood too much, sitting across from her while the other bikers filled nearby tables, their presence enough to make the entire diner feel smaller. Lily swallowed hard, her voice nearly cracking as she whispered, "Thank you for coming," her eyes glassy with exhaustion, her breath unsteady, and Jax studied her in silence for a moment, reading her pain like a book. She had fought alone for too long, had held everything together for her father even when she had no strength left, and Jax respected that, respected her, respected Elias, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. "Tell me everything," so she did. And as she told him about the mayor's corruption, the sheriff's brutality, the forged documents, the threats, the way townsfolk were too afraid to stand up, the way children cried when they saw deputies drive by, the way Elias's hands still shook from the humiliation of losing his home, the bikers around them grew silent, jaws tightening, eyes narrowing, because the Vipers could forgive a lot, fights, insults, stupid decisions, but they couldn't forgive cruelty toward people who didn't deserve it. And Lily kept talking, pausing only to steady her breath, and when she finally finished, she wiped a tear she didn't want anyone to see, whispering, "I didn't know who else to call," and Jax leaned back, tension rolling off him like heat, the kind of tension that meant someone was about to have a very, very bad night, and before he could respond, the diner door slammed open hard enough to rattle the windows, and Sheriff Douglas Pike stepped inside with two deputies flanking him, his belly stretching his shirt buttons, his smug grin curving like a man who believed the world belonged to him. And the moment he saw the Vipers, his smirk faltered before returning with forced bravado. He swaggered forward, thumbs hooked in his belt, voice dripping false confidence as he sneered, well, looks like Pine Hollow's got itself an infestation," and the diner felt cold enough to freeze breath, the bikers turning their heads slowly, like wolves acknowledging a threat. But none moved except Jax, who remained still, elbows resting on the table, gaze fixed on Pike with an unreadable calm that made the sheriff visibly uncomfortable. Pike puffed his chest, trying to recover his pride as he barked, "You boys need to ride on out of here. Pine Hollow doesn't need outsiders stirring trouble," and Jax finally spoke with a voice steady as gravel. "Funny, because trouble's the only thing your town has," and the words hit Pike like a slap, his face flushing an ugly shade of red as his hand twitched toward his holster, but before he could draw, Rocco, one of the Vipers, built like a truck, stood up slowly behind Jax, towering over Pike like a mountain, his voice a deep warning rumble. "Sit down, Sheriff," and the entire diner held its breath, because no one talked to Pike that way, no one dared, but Rocco wasn't from Pine Hollow, didn't fear Pike, didn't give a damn about his badge, and Pike's face twisted with rage and embarrassment as he backed up a step, then another, unable to mask the flicker of fear in his eyes. "You don't know who you're messing with," Pike spat, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him, and Jax replied quietly, "We'll learn," which somehow shook Pike more than any shouted threat could have, and after a tense moment, Pike left with his deputies, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the glass, but not hard enough to mask the fear clinging to him like sweat. While the diner exhaled collectively, realizing they had just witnessed the first crack in the sheriff's armor, Jack stood up, rolling his neck slowly, the decision already made in his mind, his voice calm but final as he said to his men, "Gear up. Tonight we start sending a message," and Lily's breath hitched with a mix of fear, relief, and disbelief, because the Iron Vipers weren't just here to scare Pike. They were here to take Pine Hollow back, and as the bikers stood and moved with quiet purpose, leather shifting, chains glinting, the town outside seemed to pulse with a new energy, the first spark of hope Pine Hollow had felt in years, because tonight, two corrupt old men who thought they owned the world were about to learn a lesson written not with laws or paperwork but with roaring engines, unbreakable brotherhood, and justice delivered by men who didn't fear bullies, men who hunted them.